What's going on with the aliens? Let's check in on the aliens. There are a lot of chattery things going on about aliens, and it's worth digging into just a few fun acronyms and catching up with where the government is in the early 2020s. Hi, it's Ftrhstry. This is a time vortex from the 2120s. We are remembering the next 100 years. And in the next 100 years, humans get to meet aliens, or at least alien drones. So, in the 2020s, you're right on the brink of this, and it's very exciting. And the new news in the early 20s, like as in 2022-ish, is that you've got finally a working group in the United States military and intelligence organizations, and this group is called the Aoi MSG. It stands for Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. Doesn't it just roll off the brain? Airborne Object Identification and Management Synchronization Group. Now, this also comes with an Airborne Object Identification and Management Executive Committee, or Council rather, which is appointing the director of the Airborne Object Identification Management and Synchronization Group, or Aoi MSG. Can we speak it? Aoi MSG. No, not really. The Aoi MSG. That's the shortest thing they could come up with at the Department of Defense. It's headed up, and this might be kind of fun, by the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. This is a person whose name in the early 20s, at least as of, May 2022, his name is Ronald S. Moultrie. The Honourable Ronald S. Moultrie is the dude in charge. He's the closest thing to a person who has responsibility to whether this alien shit gets off the ground or what. And this committee has actually some broad scope, they've been assigned some big-ish tasks, and those tasks include basically getting the government's shit in one sock, WRT aliens. What kind of observations do we need? Do we need new material? Do we need to design new programs? And specifically, we've got to figure out how these aliens are getting into our anomaly special use airspace. We are surveying the anomalies in our special use airspace. They have a lot of, it's actually aerospace, because short words are not good enough for the United States military. It's got to be longer. Honestly, it seems reasonable to expect that it's possible they may be adding syllables just to bore you out of paying attention to this, or to mask the fact that nobody has any idea what's going on. Because it's quite embarrassing for high-powered intelligence and military officials to not have good answers for the United States public, or the public of the world, and that's why they haven't been happy to say very much about this subject for a very long time indeed, because of course they have had sightings of things like this for a very long time, and previous presidents, including Barack Obama, have said things like, what we know is there's stuff that we don't know what it is. And previous intelligence agents who have been in charge of classified aerospace technology have said off the record that this does not belong to us as far as they know. And that's people who knew about all the cutting edge aerospace tech that the United States was developing. You might want to put in context if you're saying, now, come on, aliens is a reach, bruv, that Russia's not as good at militarying as some people thought they were, and that the United States aerospace tech is pretty far behind its independent contractor SpaceX. When you look at what, say, the heavy launch system they've been developing with Boeing for a decade is churning out, it's pretty bad, bruv. It's not great. So you think government can build things that can go Mach 21 and suddenly evade the sensors of the highest powered fighter jets heretofore created in the early 2020s, theretofore created? I'm going to say probably not, bruv. And it's okay that people are still skeptical about this. They'll quickly switch to a position of not caring very much that there are aliens everywhere, because that's just how people are. They adapt, but the transition is still quite exciting. So what else should you know? In 2021, there was a preliminary report that Congress demanded and that the Pentagon delivered. And in this report, they grudgingly admitted that they have a collection of about 143 reported sightings of unidentified aerial phenomenon. They're changing the SEO from UFO to UAP, whatever, we're going with it. That's the new thing now, the UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon. It's harder to make plural, but it is plural, so you don't need the S. It's not UAPs, it's UAP, because it would be phenomena in the weeds. What else did they say? They said 18 of these 143 objects were doing fly-type stuff, like they looked like they were maybe conducting maneuvers and evading signal readings and generally being very weird. And I'm sure you have seen or could quickly see, if you wanted to, video of stuff like this. It looks like a grey field and little boxes tracking very quick-moving dark objects in the centre, with pilots saying things like, "Good Lord, that's quite odd." I'm fairly sure that's a direct quote. So Congress, as a result of all of this activity, which has been sort of bubbling up for years under a previous version of this task force, has sort of grabbed the lapels of the Department of Defense and the intelligence agencies and said, "What the heck is going on with these aliens, bruv?" And everybody wants to know, is it really aliens? And like, can we get some answers on that? So we're finally heading into a position where we might have some science, and from the future, I can tell you that in the late 20s, you do get a lot more information about this, and it's because the AIOMSG starts coordinating resources within the United States federal government to streamline the reporting of these incidents. They say Navy pilots almost hit these things fairly frequently because they're up in this special use aerospace where they shouldn't be. It's a little bit unclear from reading the Department of Defense literature about this whether the Airborne Object Identification Management and Synchronization Group qualifies as the Anomaly Surveillance and Resolution Office, which Congress dictated that they, the military and intelligence services, must create. It seems likely that the AOIMSG is going to be the ASRO. Good Lord, they're like hiding it one letter at a time. So if you want to send a public information request, you could send it to the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, the Honourable Ronald S. Moultrie, and you could, if you're quite diligent, perhaps dig up the names of the director of the AOI MSG, which as of May 2022 was not public, but that person exists, and they're starting to brief Congress in secret-ish ways. They expect that within about a month or two, in June of 22, they will be up and running and reporting to the public, or at least to the public's representatives, and they're already doing some kind of behind-the-scenes classified briefing of senators and congresspeople who are not thrilled with how this is going. They're kind of pissed, to be honest. They want more information, and they want more activity, and they want more responsibility within the system. And again, I would just cheerfully direct their inquiries to the Honourable Ronald S. Moultrie. He must know more about this than Senators Rubio or Gillibrand, for example. This has been a very pasty item, hasn't it? Okay, so zooming forward from this glimmering moment in 22 to where I'm from, 21, 22, how does this play out? Where are these aliens going? And the short answer is they've come from quite far away. But they're not coming in droves, and there aren't a ton of biological creatures, unfortunately. So there's sort of a bit of a disappointing, slow element to it from my perspective in the 2120s. But in the 2020s and 2030s and 2040s, there's an explosion of new information for humanity in the form of interface with these drones. Yeah, they turn out to be alien drones. They are basically scouts and resource collectors. They're basically part of a von Neumann program, which, if you don't know, is basically the self-replicating probe program, where you explore a galaxy by sending out probes that make copies of themselves, and then those copies make copies, and you cover the whole galaxy that way. So in the late 2020s, you're finally able to identify one of these things fairly close up, and by identify, you just mean you get more and more visual information, more and more statistical data about what these things are, how they can move, where they like to operate. It's not just these special use aerospace zones. They like to swim in the ocean. They like to fly around the Earth. They're harvesting materials. They're doing science. They're just kind of data collecting. is their main operation, really. They're not like here to conquer or here to share technology. They're just kind of, you know, doing alien stuff, bruv. But then in the 30s, you finally get to talk to them because superintelligence shows up on the scene, and the late 20s into 30s, as we transition from being able to identify or at least catch in the act these aliens, you start to transition to sort of holding up flashcards. Me, human, love you, alien, coffee sometime, dinner, maybe, we'll see how it goes. And what you get back from this eventually is some interfacing communication, but it requires a fairly high level brain to do that. So it's going to have to wait on superintelligence. And in the 30s, when you have superintelligence and swarms that can follow these aliens around as governed by an AI that really knows how to kind of gamify this experience, you're going to get some pretty good feedback. And the feedback you're going to start to get in drips and drabs into the 40s is that these probes are part of a huge network, like vast, sprawling, in some cases, extragalactic network, but largely, for the most part, the probes are within this galaxy. And this is where you hit the wall, because the probes know a lot about where they've come from, but they don't know all that much about the real-time status of all the other probes in the network. So humans are, through this intercommunication, introduced to a sort of slower concept, a galactic time. And this kind of chills the whole thing out. While it's quite beautiful, it does not turn into Star Trek, Star Wars style Battlestar Galactica faster than light travel. Unfortunately, that's really kind of a bummer, but it's like, it's also super cool to know that these probes have come from far away. And obviously there is some increased information just in their technical abilities that they can deliver to the human race, and the practical knock-on effects to that technologically are significant, like specifically for flying, but also for just like energy manipulation that help do things like terraform inhospitable places and allow for quick travel within the solar system, and then even toward exoplanets, yeah, which is great, but they're not going to get you faster than light. So you start getting into the scale of like, oh yeah, you can get to like nearby stars at like a reasonable speed, but a reasonable speed for aliens like this is like, it's still decades, or, you know, as you get a little further out, like hundreds of years to get to the center of the galaxy. So when I'm from, in the 2120s, we're still very much like pressing the limit there. We've got probes now heading out in every direction, like toward every star, toward the center of our galaxy, toward the centers of other galaxies, and they're going as fast as they can, and we're trying to lap them with new technology. But in some ways, as fast as we've expanded, we've sort of hit this wall where we're now waiting on the structure of the universe, and that is now the limiting factor in terms of our temporal engagement with the broader world. So there's this very exciting new sort of map of the universe, a whole bunch of information about galactic history and other intelligent organizations that have visited various parts of the galaxy, but you don't get real-time information about what's going on with all those pieces in the immediate, and there's not a ton of interaction like a fleet of Blanksthorps hopping out of hypertubes to decimate Martian colonies or something, which, you know, whew, goodness, it's more relaxing that way. So you're heading for a peak of holy cow alien interaction, followed by a long, slow, comforting trough of, and now we shall explore the stars together. Anyway, cool, the Aoi MSG. If you took nothing away from that, we could all learn that acronym together. I learned it in reading this ancient future history. To the stars! Goodbye.